That'd be phenomenal. I just have a conversation with you and not have to spend too much time writing. I just jot
Oh,
notes as we go.
yeah, that's the world I live in too.
Yeah. Awesome. Awesome, man. Well, no, thank you for your time today. I appreciate you, wanting to jump in this topic with me. So
Yeah, and since we've been connected forever on Facebook without talking, feel free to pepper in some personal details as well.
yeah, no,
It's an opportunity to get to know you also. So,
yeah, absolutely, man. So we'll dive in. Like, I mean, tell me about your background. Like, tell me about what you do and how long you've been doing it.
yeah, what I do always seems to be in constant evolution. What I seem to be focusing on these days, even though I don't market it so much, I'm still trying to quantify it, is I'm helping people more and more with their inner life.
Hmm.
This conversation they have about who they are and what matters and you know how you're supposed to respond to people. I was talking to a client yesterday, not to tangent too much. She was talking about a conflict she was having with her husband, and she shared a lot of his background, his childhood. Very cold environment, not a lot of affection. Hers was different. She finds a lot of value in close human connections, spending time together, shared experiences, sharing emotions. He's very distant. And she asked me, why am I not enough? And I pointed out, I said, I don't know that he's ever had his needs met through a relationship. He's always told he had to be on his own. And the way he lived his life pretty much modeled that. So the conversation he has, his belief systems about why things are the way they are, what his worth is, how he needs to be to feel safe. There's so much muck in that in people. And helping them understand it as a conversation and changing the conversation is what I seem to be spending more time on and becoming incredibly good at it. And of course, I focus primarily on the term I use is ADHD, autism and ADHD, the co-occurring conditions. So yeah, I'm glad you're making me say this out loud because it helps me clarify it in my own thinking. So
Yeah. No, no problem.
helping people with ADHD find some semblance of peace within
Mhm.
their nervous system, as opposed to trying to find it out here where you won't.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about that first because I think that's an important jumping off point because I don't think that many people who, quote unquote neurotypical people really understand the turmoil that people who have ADHD and autism have, inside their cognitive selves. So can you talk about, really what that's like for them, because my wife has ADHD, so I live in the environment. I understand how it works.
So is she over your shoulder like this going, mm-hmm,
But yeah, if you could break that down, like really what they experience.
absolutely. Autism is a global dysregulation of the nervous system. There's so many systems involved. You'll have sleep disturbances, executive function problems, GI tract issues, autoimmune. I mean, and they haven't quite, they sometimes think they've found the silver bullet, but then it turns out to be in a small subset that applies, not
Yeah.
globally. But what's really curious about autism are the deficits in communication and connection.
Hmm.
Seeing the value in other people, seeing them as more than objects or a means to an end, feeling that yearning for connection. Either that's missing in some people with autism or it's there very strongly, but the skills to do something with that are lacking. So they'll try to socialize, they'll be very social, but they suck at it.
Yeah.
Because some people that misunderstand that will fail to diagnose autism with someone because they'll say, "Oh, you're too social or you talk a lot." Yeah, but what's the quality of it? It's not just the desire, how effective am I?
Hmm.
So it's usually the social pieces and maybe the sensory pieces that show up first. A kid that doesn't want to be touched. There's a young lady I know that said she couldn't stand to have her mom hold her. Her mom had to always put her down. And she couldn't understand what the problem was, why her kid was rejecting her. It turned out to be a sensory issue. And of course, that translated later in life into problems with relationships because they're supposed to be touching in relationships.
Yeah.
So I don't know how she got past that or if she did. I know the sensory pieces are big for me and my boys. For me in particular, it's light touch. So if I'm somewhere where people are going to be brushing up against me in a crowded area, that can make me become hostile pretty quickly because my nervous system sees that as a threat.
Mm-hmm.
So I, in many cases, have to warm up ahead of time with some deep pressure or a plan for how do I get out of it if I have to.
Yeah.
And usually it's a matter of my wife saves my spot in line, I get the hell out of there and
Right.
calm down, and then she lets me know when I can re-engage. So
Yeah. Yeah, like yeah, no, that all makes a lot of sense. Like what for and talking about adults, who have autism and ADHD, in what ways is that like and we're looking at this from a work standpoint, in what ways does it impact their work life?
well, if there's a lot of sensory stuff, because you were talking about a specific context, like
We're talking about like automotive. We're talking about people who work in auto repair.
so auto repair, and I've seen a couple people on the spectrum that were amazing at auto repair, but they were discouraged, usually by their parents, because they were concerned about the alpha male culture that can be in some of these places. And they
Hmm.
were afraid their child would be picked on, exploited, and that happens.
Hmm.
People that are very insecure, immature, or just kind of predatory themselves,
Yeah.
they'll see, hey, man, look at that mess with this kid. And hey, it's not my fault he's this way, blah, blah, blah. And they have this whole story giving themselves permission to be an a-hole,
Yeah.
victimize this person. So one thing that really needs to happen in any place, whether it's an auto shop or a school or a boardroom, is there has to be some kind of an equity sense,
Hmm.
where we support people in being successful with what they need. We don't compare ourselves to them and knock them down because they're not me. I'm really good at this stuff and you suck, blah, blah, blah. So what? You have different skill sets. You weren't hired because you're twins. Each person adds something to the team. Let's see it that way.
Hmm.
And if somebody's struggling, how do I lift them up so they can do their best as a member of the team, as opposed to, hey, how can I make them look bad so that I look a little better to the boss? That's competitive. That's not cooperative. And that's how you not only prevent teams from happening, but you alienate very good people. You disempower them and you kick their morale away when they could actually they could elevate the entire place. It's a difference in mindset. It's an us versus a me
Hmm.
versus you.
Yeah.
And that's something that's healthy anyway. But when you have somebody that really needs to navigate the environment differently than you,
Hmm.
that's an opportunity for you to become educated and more empathic because you're getting to know an experience you're not familiar with. And hopefully enough where you can say, man, I don't understand your struggle, but I can see you're struggling. And if there's anything I can do to make it less of a struggle, happy to work with you on that. One
Yeah.
thing, and this happened to me a long time ago, I don't even think I was married yet, but I was driving somewhere and all of a sudden my muffler blew and I was by a muffler shop. So I just pulled in and they were going to take care of it. I'd never seen it done before. So they say, you want to watch? And I spaced out for a little bit and the guy fired up the torch. And you know how loud that pop is. I, I literally felt like my feet came off the ground. And my startle reflex, it's a little less sensitive because I've been working on it, but I do not want to be in environments where that might happen because it is so hard for me to feel safe again.
Hmm.
It takes a while for my nervous system to calm down. And part of that requires that I get the hell away from whatever caused the startle. So in an environment like that, if you got someone with a startle sensitivity, one of the things you could work in is like an announcement, almost like military, fire in the hole, right? Before they blow off a mortar or something,
Mm-hmm.
because they don't want you to be scared and start shooting in the direction, thinking you're being attacked, right?
Right.
So it's like, hey, everybody, this is what's happening. If you did that with somebody with a noise sensitivity, that would be wonderful. And these folks might also wear what looks like really pretty much are the same thing. The headphones, like the guys at the airport who are guiding the
Mm-hmm.
planes, they wear those because the engines are so loud it would blow out their eardrums otherwise. And
Yeah.
there are some people with autism whose hearing sensitivity is so off the charts that they need those headphones on just to tolerate normal conversation in a room.
Yeah.
And with the ADHD, those they haven't pinpointed all of the aspects of it, but the neuroscientists are doing wonderful work. I just don't know what they're talking about because of all those big scientific words and stuff. But primarily, it's a dopamine regulation problem in the brain that causes ADHD. There's usually too much or too little. It's difficult to get it right in that sweet spot, but people find their own routines, exercise in the morning, some caffeine while you're at work, movement breaks, some music pumping at certain times. Music's a big one for me to keep the dopamine flowing so you can be productive. But you don't always control your environment. So there are times where you'll start to get bored because the conversation's not exciting and you'll start to tune out and it'll be seen by someone else as a deliberate act of apathy. You don't care, you're not listening. Well, I don't know how to keep myself pumped up when you're telling me something I don't care about.
Mm.
And that's something I've had to figure out how to do so I
Yeah.
can stay engaged. So, like I said, the internal conversation is what changes. What it means to you to listen to a person who's telling you something you care about. So I've worked for the past 30 years to figure all this out because the number one problem I've been trying to solve for myself is how can I connect with other people more easily? Because my whole life before that was offending people and not knowing why, because I was
Mm-hmm.
so blunt, I was honest. If I had an opinion, I shared it. I would often compliment girls on their body parts and didn't realize you weren't supposed to do that, but I thought I was giving her a compliment. And I mean, I was so naive and didn't know why I was not connecting with other people well. And then when I learned I was on the spectrum and like, phew, well, that explains it. Now I got to figure out how this relationship thing is done and start practicing these things, only to discover a lot of it's BS. It's cultural nonsense that has a specific agenda to it. It doesn't allow us to discuss emotions open and honestly. So I needed to figure out kind of how to have my cake and eat it too. What is enough for them to feel listened to, or enough for them to feel connected with, and what's flexible enough that they would be okay with doing that on my behalf.
Mm-hmm.
So I figured out a lot of the midway points and how to quickly get the other person on board. So a lot of trial and learning to do it. But it's about being authentic to myself instead of masking and not asking the other person to play a role for me
Mm.
or to do a lot of things that don't feel natural to them just to accommodate me. Because when I do that, I'm asking them to do the very thing I tell them they can't do to me.
No,
So,
makes no, totally makes sense. And I want to kind of dive into that bit you're talking about, just the masking aspect, and then just full disclosure aspect. Because I think something my wife is very good about when she was kind of working before she started working for herself. But something she was doing when she had jobs, she was open. She said, okay, I'm going to tell. She would tell her employers, I have ADHD. This is how I communicate. So she's very upfront. Do you think it's important for a person entering a job to be very upfront with their boss about having a condition?
so much of it depends on the environment.
Hmm.
As there are some environments that, there are some corporate environments where it looks like a room of robots. They all got suits and they got similar haircuts and they're all talking the same language. And if that's a culture where kind of sameness and uniformity and falling in line is important, disclosure could get you canned
Hmm.
because you're going to mess with the way things are done. You're going to want them to do things differently, and that's not how we do things here. But if it's an environment where people talk a lot about inclusivity,
Yeah.
you know, and they talk about we're a family here, where relationships seem to be important, I find those environments are a lot more flexible because they value the individual and, hey, your family, come in here, come with us, be part of it. So that's something you hopefully can find out about a company before you even apply or interview.
Hmm.
So that's just kind of the vibe that I felt. The jobs that have not worked out for me are the ones that seem much more transactional. Here, do
Okay.
this. When you're done with it, okay, do that. Because when it comes to executive functions, the executing on what's happening in your head is the problem. And ADHD execution is where the breakdown is. Being able to organize your thinking, prioritize everything, or figure out the series of steps, put it into a plan, and then when you go to take the first step, you forget it all
Yeah.
because you have a lousy working memory. Mine is absolutely atrocious. It's like in the third percentile. So 97% of the world has much better memory than me. So I have to write down a lot. I'm constantly looking at my phone and doing searches, and because sometimes I remember it, but I need the backup because the majority of the time I don't.
Hmm.
So if somebody would allow me that in a workplace, because my ability to find the information and know what to do in a nanosecond is not necessary because I'm neither a brain surgeon or an airline pilot,
Yeah.
or maybe a cop. They could use much quicker judgment a lot of the time. They make a lot of emotional decisions. Anyway, like with your wife, just those little differences, those little accommodations that maybe add at most 30 seconds to what you do, because maybe you need to stop and figure out which thing, then you need to open up your notebook or open up your app, whatever it is. But if a person is supported in the right way, it shouldn't add so much time to their day that it is a detriment to the company.
Yeah.
But sometimes they just think of the change. Oh, we gotta do something else. And they think it's gonna be a hell of a lot harder than it actually is. Not to mention, there may be a lot of undiagnosed ADHD people working for you already that see what's happening. Like, man, that looks pretty cool. I'd like to try that. And before you know it, you got a bunch of people using it and everybody's happier.
Yeah. No, it's very true. It's very true. So for the person who, for the person who has, ADHD, autism, just in the working environment, how important is it for them to, once they get in the work environment, to establish the relationships and to connect? You talk about just the value of doing that, so that, they do feel like they're part of the team when they're in there, and how can a supervisor ensure that they all feel included as well?
They absolutely need to know how to self-advocate.
Hmm.
They need to have a sense of what problems might occur for them in that environment. I call it POTS, problems of the space. What problems are there just being in that space?
Hmm.
And I've had to tell this countless times to school teachers. They say, oh, you know what? He just won't pay attention. I said, well, it's not quiet enough in the room, according to this child. What do you mean? It's the quietest room in the school. I said, I'm not talking about noise. I'm talking about the number of sounds. You got one kid rustling in their seat. You got another kid loudly flipping through the pages. This kid could hear every word the teacher was saying in the next room perfectly because of how sensitive the ears were. I
Yeah.
said, there are so many number of sounds competing for this kid's attention, they can't focus. So what's probably needed is something to cover the ears. It's not asking the kid to try harder to pay attention, because it's not only an internal problem. For a lot of people to do that internal conversation work, they need to control the noise around them first.
Okay.
Grade school kids don't have the inner discipline to just tune it out. Let's give them some help. Get the kids some foam earplugs or some of those headphones, whatever will work. But the more a person knows themselves and what problems might exist in that space, after they're hired, or this is kind of a personal judgment when to disclose if you do, you could maybe throw some hypotheticals out there. Say I needed this, or say this situation arose. How would you normally handle something like that? And that would give you a sense of how flexible the boss is. I would
Mm-hmm.
want them to come to me. We would want to deal with that right away. Or, hey, we had another guy like that, and this is how we handled it. It's no problem whatsoever. Because you need to know how self-advocacy is going to be received. Because there'll be times where you'll speak up and say, hey, man, can I take a longer break? I'm a little overloaded. It's been a lot noisier here today than usual. Is that okay? And this happened to one of my sons. No, you got this long a break. You got to be back here or you're fired. Didn't care. And my son tried to explain what the issue was.
Mm-hmm.
And I think at one point he told him to get a doctor's note or something. And, that would have taken a very long time to procure. But it seems that the first instinct in many cases is to not believe the employee.
Mm-hmm.
Prove it. Get me a doctor's note. Until then, tough shit,
Yeah.
And that response will get an employee to do nothing as opposed to follow through with what you asked.
No, that makes sense. So it'd be important for, like, if they're an auto technician, to ask or request that they structure their bay in a way that makes them successful, having the tools in a certain place, having their computer in a certain place, just having everything where it's comfortable for them to work, so that it works for them. Their environment works for them.
Absolutely. And one of the most important reasons for things to be organized and same and never change is because of how difficult it is to problem solve in real time.
Uh,
There's difficulty with visual processing, auditory processing. So taking in what's happening, making sense of it, creating a plan, and then executing that plan. This is everything somebody with ADHD or autism absolutely sucks at. And you add stress to it, urgency, this is when a person is most likely to have a meltdown and start screaming and crying. Man, I've had more of those than I can count,
yeah.
because things happen faster than my nervous system knew what to do with it. So it just said, stop. A meltdown is stop. I am absolutely saturated. Can't do any more.
Okay. Now
Wait,
for
wait, but then what did we start with? How do we get down that?
oh, so we talked about just the importance of just structuring their
Oh yeah,
workspace
the
so
sameness.
that they're successful, huh?
Why it has to be same. Some people
Yes.
say, oh, they're just controlling, they don't like change, but they don't tell you why.
Yeah.
No, because once those things are in that place, you don't have to solve those problems ever again. You don't
Hmm.
have to use your executive functions like, how do I organize and prioritize and sort? If you suck at that, it was hard enough to do it the first time.
Right.
So now having those solved, those are decisions you do not have to make. You can just focus on the work that you need to do, and life goes so much more easily.
All right. Let's talk about, managing someone who has ADHD or autism. How can a shop owner, how should a boss manage someone with either of these conditions?
Depending on where the person has the most struggles,
Hmm.
if the person's like really forgetful, or time blindness is an important one. People that just don't have a sense of time.
Hmm.
They lose track of maybe what day of the week it is. They might come in on a day they're not scheduled to work. And, I think my oldest son has done that. And that's something maybe to be treated with some humor,
Yeah.
or like, oh man, you know what happens? It's okay. Enjoy the rest of your day, as opposed to, come on, man, get your shit together. What's going on? Pay
Yeah.
attention. Gotta look at your schedule, man. Come on, be a grown up, and all that stuff that get dumped on people
Yeah.
when they make a simple mistake. Or if a person's constantly like they're not taking their breaks because they get hyper focused on what they're doing, they might need a reminder. Where other
Hmm.
people are maybe responsible. Hey man, you're responsible for yourself. I'm not your mommy or whatever. You're responsible for your own breaks. Person with ADHD will mess that up likely, unless they become so hyper focused on the time that they're not paying attention to their work because they keep getting distracted.
Yeah. Okay. And how about check-ins? Something that's big with in the auto space is just really for auto shop owners to have one-on-one meetings with their team. How important is it for a manager to have meetings with people who have ADHD autism to really just kind of check things down, see how things are going, see how they can help to improve the environment for them, what concerns they may have, and how they can address those. How important is it, for the
It,
success of the employee to
it,
have those
it's
meetings
it's
with their owner?
it's critical, because in many cases the employee will not come to you otherwise,
Hmm.
because a lot of their self-talk is, I don't want to bug them, they got enough to worry about, they're really busy. And there are many people I've worked with over the years where I had to help them look at that self-talk really closely and see that's fear.
Hmm.
That those aren't facts, that's fear talking, and it's
Yeah.
giving you a story to endorse its objective, which is for you to not do this. So once we kind of pulled the layers of the story apart, the story fell apart, and it seemed more and more like, I'm going to advocate for myself to someone who wants to help me. That's what the conversation turned into. And now there was no resistance. And they connected with the boss, and the boss said, oh man, I'm so glad you brought that to me. We got to take care of that right now. But getting through that initial resistance is what's difficult. If you have enough meetings with an employee, and the employee gets the the impression that you not only care, but that you want to understand. Because one of the most common phrases that goes through someone with neurodivergence minds their entire life is, nobody understands me.
Yeah.
And they project that on the entire world. And even if they make some friends, as long as that belief is still swimming around in there will be this anxiety between them and their friends, because there's always this fear that this person doesn't get me enough for me to trust them and feel safe with them, because they haven't gotten rid of the nobody understands me yet. So they usually require some digging. Not everybody's willing to do it, but if they will, we find it, get rid of it, freedom.
Okay. And then for the technician, the person working who has ADHD, how can they harness their abilities to make them successful?
Well, one thing they need to figure out is what helps them keep their feeling of enthusiasm or happiness
Hmm.
going. Do they need to listen to podcasts all day around certain topics that really jazz them up? Listen to their favorite music? Do they need to move in a certain way? You know, do they need to stop every half hour and do 5 jumping jacks? I don't care how weird it is, but what do they need to do to stay up and focused? That's one of the most important problems to solve for them. Otherwise, they may look around the environment to do it for them. They'll say stuff like, man, it's not my fault it's so boring here.
Yeah.
Or it's too quiet, man. Somebody turn on some music. The environment is not always responsible for meeting your needs. See what you can do to bring the solutions with you. Don't count on there to be music there. Bring a smartphone, or I don't even know. Is there anything other than smartphones that play music anymore? I don't even know.
Yeah, you can get those little portable, like, Bluetooth players.
Yeah, I haven't even seen those. You know,
Yeah.
everybody telling me, "Oh, I've got a new car. You can play the music right through the Bluetooth." Good for you, man. I'm glad mine starts half the time.
Yeah. So how important is flexibility? How important is it for a boss to be very flexible with an employee who's neurodivergent? Whether that person, like you said, needs extra breaks, now they need to, maybe something happened and they need to be flexible with them being late to work, or maybe they need to be flexible with them staying later. So, okay, is it okay if I stay later and finish something that I started because I'm focused on it? Like, how important is it for them to be flexible?
That's a longer discussion because
Okay.
often the employee will be inflexible around an issue and they'll say it's my disability when it's not. It's their anxiety.
Uh-huh.
It's an experience that's happened that they haven't dealt with and they don't want to have that mess with. So they just say, oh, I can't do that. It's my disability. I can't think of a specific example right now, but that happens more often than people think because
Mm-hmm.
they don't know how to challenge it in a respectful way that helps the employee kind of realize eh, this isn't something we accommodate.
Yeah.
But one place I can see there being flexibility for a couple, the longer breaks when needed. But
Mm-hmm.
if the longer breaks become too common, it needs to be examined whether that's being exploited
Yeah.
or whether the employee needs to tweak their self-care a bit.
Mm-hmm.
Because before they weren't needing so many long breaks, but now they are. How's their sleep? How are they eating? Are they hydrated? I mean, this is stuff that people need to pay attention to anyway.
Right.
But people with neurodivergence, especially ADHD, will get so hyper focused on things, they'll forget to drink, they'll forget to eat. They sometimes won't go to the bathroom. And then all of a sudden it'll be urgent and they'll have to go like now.
I see.
And
Yeah.
and it's not their break time, but like you want it on the floor or you want it in the bathroom. Take your choice. But it's happening right now.
Yeah.
And I know some people that their peak hours are odd hours. They're not 9 to 5. They're maybe like 11 to 7. That's when they do their best work. So if the setup allowed for that, then
Hmm.
you might have them working kind of overlapping shifts because you don't want them in a 9 to 5 and then you have 2 or 3 good hours from them. And the rest of the time, it's hey, come on, man, wake up, pay attention.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And how about the importance of asking for help? Because I know that's something my wife kind of can struggle with at times because she wants to always be perceived as I'm normal, I'm okay. But she needs my help, and I know it, and I can tell when she does.
If
Like, how
she's
important is it
normal
for?
and okay, is she ever going to need help?
That's what I'm saying. No one, yeah, but that's like, but it's that perception of I don't want to feel like I'm a burden, so I don't want to ask for help.
Well, the thing to examine is when was she made to feel like a burden for asking for help?
Yeah.
Because that's something that I'm still unpacking. But the more I am able to make peace with, the easier it is for me to ask for help more often.
Hmm. So for a boss, how important is active listening? When it comes to the employee who has got who's neurodivergent, who's explaining to them, hey, this is why I'm doing this, and then the boss is not isn't thinking, oh, here comes another excuse, or here's another reason why you're not doing your work. How important is it for them to like active listening, empathetic listening, and try to help them problem solve it?
It's one thing I would ask is what are you listening for?
Okay.
Are you listening for here's the indications that this is bullshit? If you're looking to call a person out, basically you're entering the conversation already doubting what you're going to hear.
Hmm.
You're expecting to be lied to. So if that's what you think you're going to hear, you're less likely to have any kind of empathy because you believe this is a story, not an experience.
That's good.
But when you come into it with curiosity, oh, I wonder what's happening for this person. Then you hear it from a more neutral standpoint and you get to take it in first. And then you get to ask yourself, what what does this person want me to understand?
Yeah.
And coming at it from that standpoint, it doesn't have to be filtered through bias. in any
Hmm.
way. But if a person's in a kind of a mood, they're thinking, man, people really suck today. I hope nobody puts anything else on my plate. Then your employee comes in and needs your help, maybe sorting out a misunderstanding with an employee. And your response is, great, this again. Wow.
Yeah. All right. And then here's another probably I think my last question is surrounding training, because something that technicians have to do, they have to do ongoing and constant training. And I know, like I said, for my wife, I know just her sitting down to study, or like, it has to be something that's really, really interesting to them. So how important is it for the shop owner to really understand what aspects of repair gets them excited and really push them in that direction, as opposed to telling them, oh, well, go learn this, and it's something that they don't want to learn, and all of a sudden they're in trouble or in hot water because they're not learning a particular thing, but really helping them to focus their career path on aspects of repair that makes them successful, which also makes the shop successful.
Well, if there's something they really love to do, a repair they love to make, a part of the car they love talking about, because you're likely going to find the more time they spend with something, the faster they're going to be able to do it, the
Mm-hmm.
better it's going to be done. And they might even find workarounds nobody else discovered
Hmm.
because they spend so much time solving the problem of that part of the car. It's like the ones like the pit crew. The guy
Yeah.
takes the tire off and put it back on. That's the only thing he does.
Right.
If the guy that can't fill the gas stubs his toe, the guy that does the tire is going to do the tire.
Right.
He's not gonna say, "Oh man, I got you. Don't worry about it." No, because he doesn't have the repetitive body memory of doing that over to the point where he doesn't have to think about it. He just does it.
Yeah.
But when it comes to a person not wanting to know the other parts, that's something to be examined from a mental flexibility standpoint. Have
Mm-hmm.
they decided, oh, I don't do that. I just do this part. And now we have to look at that belief or that decision and find flexibility in it so that they realize, oh, I jumped the gun. I didn't realize I also do this part. I do this part and I also do the other part that I need to learn. So helping widen their lens in a way that isn't, no, you're thinking wrong about this. This is the right way to think about it. That can start the power struggle.
Mm-hmm.
Who wants to be wrong? Because people that are neurodivergent tend to personalize everything. It's not that their thinking was wrong, it's that they're wrong. I'm wrong. I'm dumb. I don't get it. Why do they bother with me?
Yeah, actually, talk about that, because I think that's important as well. The whole concept of the rejection dysphoria,
Yeah,
and how
every
that can affect
no,
the employee, huh?
every no is a character criticism. That's how it's interpreted by them. And what
Yeah.
really, really sucks is how many people suffer with that and don't want to examine it. They don't want to look at the why. They just say, oh, it's because of this diagnosis. No, it's because you personalize everything. That's something you do with your brain. That's not something that is inherent and hardwired into your nervous system so much that there is zero flexibility and no chance of you ever being able to hear no and brush it off.
Yeah.
Because I've worked so long and healed so much trauma and gone through so much cognitive stuff to get to a point where a no isn't something I just want to give up living over.
Yeah.
I mean, not to the point of self harm or anything, but just like not wanting to keep going. Oh, fine. I don't even know why I bother with this person, or I don't even know why I even tried to apply for that job. Like one no would be the end, any kind of effort. And that has everything to do with you believing that a no somehow enters your soul like an exploding bullet and has this ripple effect that just destroys everything. Okay, it can mean that. You see the results of it meaning that, and it means something else. Hell yeah. Let's explore that a little bit. and see what kind of results we get that way. And there are so many people that refuse to do that because they've decided, no, this is the one that irks me to no end. It's who I am.
Right.
Wow. That is the biggest gaslighting conspiracy happening out there. And a good friend of mine who I love dearly is part of the problem
Yeah.
because she's latched onto this belief. It's part of our identity. Well, you can do that, but you deny yourself a lot of opportunities by turning these qualities into static entities.
Yeah.
I just have this problem, and that's just the way it is. Really? No.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of layers to this, as you can see.
Absolutely. No, and I appreciate all that you shared. I think I've got plenty of material to work with. If I need anything or any clarification, I'll reach back out to you. But yeah, no, thank you so much for your time.
You bet, man. This has been fun, and I was able to
Yeah,
flesh out some stuff I haven't talked through before. So
yeah, no, good stuff. And then when you get opportunity, just if you could send me the link and the transcript, that'd be phenomenal.
yeah, I was just going to ask you, how do you want me to get things to you? The
You
transcript is a piece of cake, but if you
email it
want
to
the
me.
recording too,
Yeah, send them both over to me. Just email. You can email them to me, or
all right, I'll figure it
yeah,
out.
that'd be perfect. Thank you so much,
All right,
Brian.
great talking to you.
Great talking to you. Have a great Friday.
Take care, Chris.
Bye.